kwaZulu kwaphela ubaba ngiye kwaZulu kwaphela kwaZulu.
All children, African or Eskimo children, need the same thing. Their experience of the world starts when they're very small, and they need to know that the world is a safe and trustworthy place which will meet their basic needs.
Both rich and poor share the same hopes and wishes for their children. We all would want the best education for our children. We all would want our children to have the basic necessities in life. But some people cannot afford that. And that is the dilemma in which we find ourselves in.
I remember very well when I started working in Gugulethu, many people not trusting me. And one day there was an international meeting in Greenpoint, which is the big stadium in Cape Town, and I was talking with a lot of officials, all white guys, very racist group of people. And all of a sudden, a young black child screamed my name, Jan, 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 and came running and jumped up and took me around the neck. And I knew this can only be a child from Gugulethu. I did not know who she was. But the big satisfaction I got from the reaction of the people that was around me, the shock they had on their faces, and I felt very great for this child that had the courage to run up and take me around the neck as if I am her father or her brother. And then I knew I had arrived in Gugulethu.
Gugulethu was built in 1960, specifically for black people who were coming from the Transkei and the Ciskei. Those are the rural areas of South Africa. So this is how Gugulethu, and most urban areas started. The townships, including Gugulethu, are very poor because there was no commitment to the previous government to really develop human resources around these areas, especially investing in black people. It was not seen as an issue. Bantu education had been, designed to make sure that black people get a very inferior type of education. So they were not educated.
Let me give you an example of this rich and poor and how we interact. There's a street quite near to here, which is full of restaurants. It's quite a fashionable place. And you go there, and there are to be found people dining out and discussing the price of the wine and how good the wine is. And they will wonder whether to buy a third or fourth bottle of wine. And that amount that they're debating about would down here keep a street of people for a week.
This has been a very rich country, and that wealth was in the hands of a very few people. And at the time when everything was good and our natural resources really doing very well, we did not take advantage of that. And this is what we live with now. I mean, it is still very clear that the rich in this country are very rich, and the poor are poor. These children are supposed to be at school, but they are not at school today. Or preschool education, but they are not there. The law expects them to be there, but they are not. They are playing here. And it's likely that they don't have parents to send them to school. And until such time that concerned members of the community or the church decides to pay for their education, they will be lost. We have a situation in Gugulethu and the shanty towns. The shanty towns that are growing, by the way, every day. Because a lot of people are still moving from rural South Africa, Malungeni, and other areas in the Eastern Cape, flocking to Cape Town, to Durban, to Johannesburg, in the hope that they would get jobs.
If one thinks of the life in a shack, which is what you people call shanty towns, which are quite made up of leftover material that people pick up somewhere, and that becomes a home, I think you can't live worse than that.
It's very difficult to describe the poverty in certain towns. I mean, it cannot be described. I started my ministry in 1989, and I really wanted to connect with members of my congregation. There are those who would not allow me in. They were ashamed of the conditions in which they were living.
You'll find there's most probably no water, there's most probably no toilet, and you'll find in a shack measuring, say, about 9 foot by 9 foot, you might find a family of 10 to 14 people living without running water and without any toilets. The government's got a policy in place that everybody should have access to water at least every 200 yards away from his house. Can you imagine how much water you need for 14 people to bath and to wash and still go and fetch it 200 yards away and carry it?
There's just one tap, and people will be coming from areas around here, draw water from here, and that's the problem, because this is the only clean water you've got. Yeah, they'll put it in this trolley, put it on the trolley, sometimes on the wheelbarrow, and then take it home. And there's no water at home. There is also no electricity in the houses, and they all still, it's stolen electricity. This is all live wire.
There's no privacy whatsoever. You have nothing that is your own. You've got to share your beds. In many cases, people have to share their clothes. They've got to share knives and forks and spoons. People can never eat as a family in one go because there's not enough cutlery to eat with.
And these shanty towns have been built on swamplands. So it's not a question of the sun only, coming down on them. It's the wetness. It comes, from underneath too. And when the temperatures, rise up to 30, 35, 38, 40 degrees Celsius, you have a problem. So it is just very hot in the summer and very cold in the winter. I have members, as I say, in the congregation who come from these areas, who would come to me after the service and say, I wish the service would just continue. What do I go back home to?
one afternoon, we went to visit a woman aptly named Beauty. Beauty was dying of AIDS. She was sitting in a chair. She couldn't walk because her feet were too swollen. In her little shack, there were 8 children. 3 inherited from her brother, who had died a month before, 2 from her sister, who died 6 weeks before, and another 2 of her own. And she was dying. And there were 8 children. And I just had to be with Spiwa and Beauty. And about 2 weeks later, opened my email in my lovely suburban home, and there is this sentence: Beauty died today, funeral tomorrow. What a sentence. Beauty died today, funeral tomorrow. And I was so touched and moved by it. It's like the beginning of a poem. It's like the end of everything. Beauty died.